Welcome to the Riff. Today on the Riff, Jeremy and Justin sit down to talk about how important hindsight, insight, and foresight are to growing. Jeremy also has an apology at the beginning of this episode. Jeremy, I forgive you. Thanks for listening.
Hey, Riff listeners, I want to start by acknowledging a major loss in my theological proclamation on a Riff episode.
This is monumental.
I would say an apology.
Whoa.
But I think an apology maybe even infers that I'm smarter than I am. This would be an awareness of just a shock, actually.
Okay.
Probably a month ago.
Okay.
A few weeks ago, we had a podcast on Calvinism, Arminianism. Remember that one?
I remember this.
Okay.
Free will.
Yeah, free will. And so in that, it has come to my attention by many former Baptist people.
A lot of listeners.
That I have categorized Baptists in a way too general setting. A lot of Baptists have said, hey there, dude.
That's what they call you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Hey there, dude.
So Baptist.
I'm Baptist and I am free will. And many have said, hey, my thread of Baptist denomination has always been free will. And you made it sound a lot more like Baptists were more Calvinistic. And now maybe it's because of where I grew up in North Idaho. There was not as many of the same threads and there was more of a Calvinistic deal. Or maybe it's because, well, I just don't have a clue. But I want to say for all my Baptist friends out there that feel like I have labeled you, misplaced you.
Yes.
I want you to know that I take it back. I will stick to Reformed traditions that don't often include a Baptist background. Would be more Calvinistic. So, yeah.
I mean, you mentioned free will, and you also mentioned there's a wide variety.
I did. Not clear enough. I feel like I found people who were disappointed in me. And I exist to be a voice of encouragement, not a sour note of discouragement, but I have failed in my life calling. So take that as you will.
Well, this is a big moment.
Yeah, first time I've ever said anything in error on the Riff.
Yeah,
so that shocks me. But,
wow. No, you said one time, you said spigot. Remember that? You said spigot.
No.
It's a spigot, right? It's a spigot?
Yeah, well.
So I think this is the second time.
Put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
So yeah, Baptist and spigots.
And doom-dooms.
Doom-dooms.
Oh,
that's right.
Recent memory.
That's three. It's dum-dums.
Today, we are going to talk about sight. We're going to talk about vision.
Okay.
And I think this could be kind of a practical leadership conversation for us. Certainly it's got some spiritual applications too, but it's a conversation we had with our staff recently. And so I'm gonna drop 3 different types of sight that I believe God's given us. And then we could just kind of walk through areas where this could be helpful. 3 types of sight that I think are important for any type of leadership journey. You got hindsight, what happened in the past.
Okay.
You got insight, what did I learn from what happened in the past? And then you got foresight. Based on that, where do I see the direction going forward? Hindsight, insight, foresight. And in order to have vision, all 3 of those sights got to be dialed in. And so we were talking in the staff setting of, hey, what are some things in your area of ministry, in the areas that you're overseeing and spending your life in? What are some things in the past that God just showed up, man? Those are some cool moments. And it could also be the other. What are some projects that I've been a part of that's just bombed, okay? And what do we have in our hindsight? Then what insight do we have? And the worst thing we want to do is if we have a painful vision, a view of our hindsight, but we don't take the time to get some insight from it, then we're never going to arrive at foresight. So we walk through some of those things. So one, let's talk kind of a church-wise when we talk about hindsight, insight, foresight. How in whether it's event planning, whether it's buildings, campuses, kind of how do you process this? If we want foresight, we want vision, how do those other two come into play?
I just feel, I feel like I've had the privilege to be in a seat to see a lot of those pieces, right? Yeah. And when we're talking about the hindsight pieces, like, what are we learning from those, right? Yeah. I mean, we look at the Republic campus, we look at the Nixie campus right now, we look at Dream Center, right? Springfield has been there for a long time. Yeah. But you look at these three campuses, and they're in a space where we would never have even dreamed 7 years, 10 years ago. Right. Right. I mean, the health of it, the life change that we've been able to be a part of at those campuses, a lot of that has come from the insight that we learned from the campuses that honestly, they're not here. Sunshine, Joplin, right? Like, we look at it at that moment as a failure. Right. Okay, maybe it was, but the insight that we brought out of that, the systems that we've pulled out of that, how to find health in something like this, right? Like, church is an interesting deal. Like, it's a weird deal to put together, and it's just odd to work inside of it, right? So how can you find health through it? So I think the biggest thing for me is to be able to see this trajectory of from start to where we are right now with all of these pieces of you can't do it like this. You got to have this. We got to have this to be healthy. We got to treat people this way in this space, like all of this. And then it comes down to the Dream Center as well, right? Like you look at the history of the Dream Center. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. I don't know if there's a program in the Dream Center that was at day one. Is there? I don't know that. I just feel like, I mean, Jody's done such a good job of doing this principle to where she's just had open hands of saying, this might work for a season. Let's learn what we need to learn, and let's continue to move forward, right? Yeah. And in 5 years, the Dream Center will look completely different than it does today because of that type of leadership. So I just feel like you've done a good job in leading this. So when you brought it up to the staff, I don't think it was anything new. I don't think it was like, whoa, we got to learn from what was past to see forward. Because I think a lot of times people get into a space of just like, I've got vision for this. It's like, awesome. I love that. And the optimism isn't leaking. It's just been kind of like this blind optimism. And I think you've done a great job of taking that and molding it and putting it into a space to where it is, when you cast vision, we can see that the vision is there and that it's clear because you have vision of the past. Yeah. So that, for me, organizationally, that's kind of where I've sat and seen it happen. What about for you? Well, I mean, one of the things that is, you talk about that, optimism, the blind optimism is a great term because, or another way could be harmful optimism, toxic optimism. And I could lean towards that. My personality style, I'm opportunistic, meaning, I like to operate in a lot of different lanes, but opportunity is usually the most attractive thing for me. You know, opportunity to have a campus here, opportunity to start this ministry, opportunity to bring on this person on the team, these kind of things. But when we have a failure, when we have something that does not go anywhere the way we think it's going to go, blind optimism is not taking the time to milk the insight out of your hindsight, and you just say, it'll work again, right? And so that's terrible. It's terrible to skip the insight and to think, and my tendency is to never get too discouraged by failure in a hindsight. It's to, hey, let's go forward. But what I have to do is slow down and grab the insight from the hindsight before we go to the foresight. Some people's tendency is to be like, no, we got hurt there before. We're not going to do that again. We can never launch another campus because this last campus launch didn't happen. And we've had a lot of those conversations. Right. And for me, I quickly dismiss that voice. Because if the answer is we can't launch another campus, I'm down with that if it came out of insight. But if it only came out of hindsight, then that is blind pessimism, right? Great. So how do you get into that insight mode? I was going to ask you, what are some tools? What are some tools that we do when what are some autopsy of the event? So why don't you break down some of the maybe a couple of can-I tools, because maybe, I mean, this could be, I don't know if you parent or you in relationally, you want to get super logical. I think it could be helpful. For sure, if you're leading anything in an organization, here are a couple of tools that we use. So kind of walk through the right, wrong, missing, confusing tool, how we do that. We do a couple of them. Right, wrong, missing, confusing is one of them. And all of these come from StratOps, which is it's a process that a lot of organizations go through, and we've been lucky enough to have people within North Point that are certified within this, have ran this for years, and have come into our team just to be a blessing and say, I want to help.
I love it. I love that. Like North Pointers who say, hey, I want to serve. I want to give back.
That's awesome.
Here's something that I'm trained to do. You think the ministry could use this?
Yep.
So walk us through one of the exercises that probably every strat ops uses.
Is right, wrong, missing, confusing. So it's a quadrant. So you really just make a cross on the board, and you put right, wrong, missing, confusing within those spaces. And you really walk through the event, the moment, the process, what has been right, what has worked, what has made sense to everyone in the room. It's just like, this is winning, right? What is that wrong piece? What was just the absolute thing that went horrible? Right? And you're going to have them. What's the missing pieces? What did we just not do? Like, it should have had this. And then what's the confusing pieces? What are people still walking away from being like, what? I do not know why we did that. I don't know how it got to this point. What you do is you put this all on a board, and it is unreal how clarifying that is. And how quick it is too. And the room responds very easily to that, because then you're not trying to pick this stuff out of people to be like, what did you think? Are you a pessimist? Are you not? No, you have all things on the board. So wherever you're falling in whatever mood you might be in that day, you can speak truthfully to the room, and it's easy to put that on the board and not be subjective to the person that just put it on the board. Because most of the time everybody's like, yes, yeah, yep, mm-hmm. And sometimes a right might go up there and somebody's like, whoa, I thought that was a wrong. Awesome, let's put it in confusing. So it's just a very clarifying piece that we've used almost on every event. I mean, we've done it after services. We've done it in so many spaces because it's so quick, and it really does force you to get into this space of insight.
Yeah. So what I love about it is, let's say we can do that about, the season of JXP groups, right? Mm-hmm. We can do that about an event. We can do that about a series. We can do that about whatever. We say, get people in the room and quickly identify. And like some people might be like, that sounds vulnerable to do that. I'm a feeler. So like I get how that can be that way, but here's how it works really well for me. If I'm leading this session and it could be on a Saturday night right after my message, and we're like, hey, quickly, let's right, wrong, missing, confuse this thing, right? What about the message was right? What about it was wrong? And if people are like, hey, I've got it wrong, and the first 7 things are wrong, what I could do is laugh and just be like, okay, dude, love this. Thank you guys for giving me some really good feedback on this. Hey, let's kind of balance the board for a second. So let's get back to some of these, who's got some rights, and just have fun with it, right? And you could, as a leader of this, so that way you can lead the room, say, okay, awesome. Okay, now I want 5 different things that were right. And let's not move on until we get 5 different things that were this. What about it was? Another way to do it is everybody, like just to get the participation going, is everybody has 4 sticky notes, and right, wrong, missing, confusing on each of them. Everyone write at least 2 things on each one. And then now we'll share. Mm-hmm. All we're doing is saying, hey, we want to create a normative experience where we share, because experience doesn't make you better. Evaluated experience makes you better. Experience just makes you more the same, right? So, but if you evaluate the experience, because there's
so good.
There's a lot of people.
I'm gonna get that tattooed on my leg.
You should.
Oh man,
you should.
I've been looking for something for my calf.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, that would be like a rat and just kind of wrap around their thing. But bottom line is, like, there's a lot of people, like, for speaking for me, it's important. Because I know a lot of people have been speaking for 40 years and they got a lot of experience, and maybe they're not effective. And so, but I know a lot of people have been speaking for 4 years and they're very effective, because the difference is evaluate experience. So we'll do that. And then we capture that. And then all of a sudden now we have insight. Insight is when you capture this, you think about it, and it forces you to wrestle with it. Now I've got insight. So next time we do something, it helps us with our foresight. Kids camp that's coming up. We got some really cool events, whether it's student camp, kids events. We got these coming up. Well, all of these events are going to be a product of that evaluation. Mm-hmm. And when we're done with them, we'll say, okay, that's awesome. What worked, what didn't, all that. I know we've got other tools on that. Is there another tool we use on that? I'm not.
That's the main one. I mean, there's multiple pieces that come from StratOps.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the life cycle tool to where you're able to walk through where is maybe a department or a process or an event within a timeline. And as a team, you're deciding, man, is this thriving? Is it tanking? Where is this? And then understanding that there's a life cycle to organizations and to processes to where if something is tanking, that's great because you know that's the bottom floor. And now you'll go up with it. And at some point it will tank again. Like nothing ever stays on top and nothing ever stays on bottom. Like it follows the natural order of everything. It lives and dies.
Yeah.
So that's a really helpful one as well as you kind of walk through those moments. There's the milestone tool to where you walk through really the history of the organization or the event and you see what were those milestones and you kind of see a story start to progress out of it. And then, I mean, you talk about evaluated experience. That's one of the best to see the experience of it. And now let's evaluate. Wait, seems like every February we do this wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We put a new name on it. Do it again.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So there's so many tools that we've used like that have been helpful.
And we do a weekly one too of what's hot, what's not, what's next, right? And it's just a really quick check-in. But the bottom line is evaluating. So is turn your hindsight into insight. Now, we've all heard the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And if you haven't heard of it, you just, quote me on it. But I think that's also true. It can be also true in our finances, right? Is what part of our past, what part of our hindsight have we stopped and evaluated? Like, what's the insight we can get of the way we spent? Like, and we can do this on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, is how did we get here? And if you're going to get in a pinch, right, at least milk it and get some insight out of that because that's the key. Sometimes it can be discouraging to hear someone else's challenge for us to have foresight if we haven't milked our hindsight. It could be true with relationships, certainly true with our walk with Jesus as well, is just, okay, what am I learning on this journey? I just think this constant evaluation. So,
well, I also think there's an art to it too. There's an art to sitting in the loss and there's an art to sitting in the piece that didn't work. Because for me, I'm like, let's just go. Let's just get to the next, right? I'm very impatient. So I just, awesome. That didn't work. Let's jump. But there is an art to actually sitting in that mess and saying what didn't work, what did work. I mean, this is the same with parenting. This is the same thing with being a husband or being a wife. Like if I'm just like, well, that didn't work with Lily. Yeah, let's just try it again, right? She doesn't clean her room, right? That's one of the things that we're walking through right now.
Oh, Lily.
Unreal.
I've been talking to her about it.
But that's her personality too. So like Jamie and I are walking through the way that we're parenting her specifically compared to what we're doing with Ella. Ella is, I'm sure you're not supposed to give Enneagrams to kids.
No.
She's a 1. So, and Lily's a 7, right? So that's their, Ella will make sure everything is in order. She will make sure everything, that's how I am. I'm not a 1, but I want everything. Right. So it's easy. So we've been parenting Lily very similar to just like, hey, just clean it up. Set a date, set a time. Her brain doesn't work like that. Yeah. So we've been having to sit in this moment of like, what are we doing that's literally destroying her little spirit?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what are we doing? Instead of just jumping to another, try this. We're really looking at trying to get the insight out of it of, okay, what are we saying to her that isn't helpful at all? What are the things that we've done that obviously haven't worked? And it's something small like cleaning your room, but it's not going to be when she's 17. It's not going to be when she's 27, right? Like there will be moments in her life to where what we're giving her and the tools we're giving her are not going to serve her well. Yeah. So there's an art to it. There's an art to sitting in it and saying, let's just not jump, but let's do exactly what you're saying and let's can I this thing. Yeah. Oh, can I? You probably want to explain what that means.
Constant and never ending improvement.
That's right.
CANEI. We talk about that. We want to develop a can I culture at North Point. Constant and never ending improvement. Not in this weird neurotic, we want to be the best, but in let's always evaluate what we're doing so we can be the most effective for our mission. Our mission is the most important. As we go forward. And I love the parenting example because, Leanne and I, one of our regrets is that we felt like we stumbled upon a really good parenting plan, and all we needed were kids to prove it. And so, and then we had kids, and honestly, I still think the plan's solid. It was a good plan. But the challenge, our frustration is, if we weren't getting the results we wanted, it would be like, well, it's the kid's problem, right? Because the plan is gold, and the people leading that plan, wow, right? So, obviously I'm joking on it, but the truth is, we never doubted the plan. And what we should have done is evaluated. How come this is challenging for one and not the other? Or how come it could be everything? How come the way I communicate to one of my daughters, and it could be the same way with the other, and one it brings life, and so instead of being like, well, I don't know what her problem is, right? To really evaluate and say, okay, here's my hindsight. Where is the insight? Instead of just forge ahead and you better figure out how to live with me. Is to be able to say, okay, man, well, when I said this, I think we got somewhere. When I did it this way. And so it's open-handed living, saying, hey, everything's on the table. Our mission's non-negotiable. So if it's parenting, I want to raise up confident, independent kids who love Jesus. That's my desire. And so now how we get there, who knows, right? And but everything you do, you evaluate based on those results, and you tweak whatnot. And I think what that does is, if you evaluate well, you're going to have some wow moments where you're like, that event was awesome. Wow. And you're going to have some whelp moments like, welp. All right. And you never own the wow, and you never own the whelp, right? Meaning, like, listen, if it's wow, it's because you've got a great team around who's committed to this. It's because God is giving you an opportunity. You recognize there's a lot of variables, and you're just excited and you're grateful. The wows turn into gratitude, and the whelps, you're like, well, okay, here's the deal. I'm committed. I just know this is I'm going to learn something out of this. I'm going to use it. I'm not going to let this whelp make me paralyzed about jumping to the future. But I hope makes me smarter of where I jump into the future. And that's something we said at North Point. I think I've said this a few times out loud on Sundays. And I believe this. I know I've said this at staff, and I know I've probably said this in our office a lot, is every campus we launch will not work. Mm-hmm. And we will launch more campuses that don't stick. Mm-hmm. We will. My hope is our next one does, and it'll always be that. Every next one has to, right? Yeah. And there will be time, here's the deal. Our percentage should get higher and higher. The truth is, Apostle Paul's church plants, I've been over some of those places. None of them are still going.
Really?
Okay, yeah, crazy. Huh. He was decent at it. So bottom line, though, is ours should last maybe more than a couple of years. But there's reasons, and we accept it. We embrace it. There's seasons. Our job is to be obedient where God calls us and be wise where God's brought us from. If we do those two things, I think we're prepared to be opportunistic, right? So
that's great.
So, hey, wherever you're at, and whether it's a leadership deal, whether it's a family deal, whether it's a spiritual life deal, develop a can-I culture, a constant and never-ending improvement, just a sense of I want to be a great steward. I want to be very efficient and a good manager of the opportunities, the people, the finances that God's put in my path. So
that's great. Before we sign off, is there anything within this podcast that you feel like you're going to have to apologize for in a future podcast? Let's just start Insight right now.
Probably.
That's really okay.
Because my girls listen. They are Riff listeners.
Well, of course, they're part of the Riff.
If I know them right now, they're probably making a little bit of a list or texting me at the time that this drops of saying, Dad, I forgive you for that. But there's a couple other things you failed to mention of your parenting. And so in a future podcast, I'll say, yes, that too. I'm sorry. Wow. So I want to apologize in advance. I want to apologize. Yeah, let me take this moment and just be super authentic. I apologize for any way I may have offended anybody. If you were offended, I apologize for you. If I ever offend you in the future, I apologize for you too. See? That's modeling authenticity.
That's an insight.
Authentic.
I
might have to apologize for that. Got it. Such a doom. All right. Well, hey, thanks for listening to The Ref, and we'll come at you with another couple episodes soon.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Riff. We'll have a brand new episode every week, wherever you find podcasts.